All right, YouTube. As you've seen, the Brexit vote has really shaken up the UK. It's played havoc with some of the world's stocks, although they're now sort of evening out and rebounding, which was what I expected would happen. Some people thought they would keep collapsing forever, which was never going to occur. They downgraded the UK's credit to double A. Oh, only a double A rating. It's so horrible. I'm sure that this will teach them a lesson and keep those damn sovereignty movements from cropping up in additional European nations. You saw Nigel Farage, of course, basically harassing the EU's little council of unelected individuals there, just ranting at them, telling them, oh, shame on you, you should have seen this coming. And he's right in everything that he said there. It wasn't fundamentally even about immigration or money at the end. It was really about the fact that the EU does want to form a superstate. This has always been true. It's just that until recently, most people, for some reason, thought it was a conspiracy theory, even though it was always kind of the open intention of the European Union to create a federal state out of all these others. But now we've got a release from the EU, link in the description, of course. The European Union will respect the leave vote, it seems. They're not going to try to stand in the way. I think the main point is that because this sort of secessionary sentiment is running so high in the UK because of all the turmoil it's caused, it's no longer possible, even if they held a second referendum, got them to agree not to leave or something, which was never going to happen to begin with. Even David Cameron wouldn't have supported such a thing. Even if that had happened, it would no longer be possible, really, to hold the European Union together while the UK is a member. So the UK is out. They're trying actually to get it to fully leave as quickly as possible. They're actually like siding with Farage, and he's agreeing with Juncker there, which is a funny name as fuck. We should get out as quickly as possible. Yeah, we want to negotiate this speedily so we can do what we want. And he pointed out what everybody should have known to begin with. The UK leaving the EU does not mean that suddenly it becomes an enemy to all of Europe and tries to screw all of its neighbors, and the neighbors should screw the UK, and they're going to start like launching bombs at each other. That was never going to happen. The idea that the EU creates stability in Europe, I think, is absolutely laughable, judging by what I see in European news on a regular basis. I've talked about it before. You have a general rise in crime. You have social alienation, which is leading to the spawning of racial nationalists all over Europe in every single country. You have groups that formerly were quite fringe, thus cropping up and gaining relative dominance in places like France, Italy, the UK, Denmark, Sweden, all over the place, political parties whose sole purpose in some cases is, we want to leave the EU. In other cases, it's here's our platform. Part of it is renegotiating membership in the EU or leaving or leaving the euro at least, or something to those effects. We see that in Germany with quite large groups saying they at least want to scrap the euro as a currency and have their own currencies. The EU, fairly quickly, within the next couple of years, will not even closely resemble what it does today. Additional countries will probably have left. Turkey will probably have joined. The economies of the EU states will be weaker and more prone to wild swings and volatility in world markets. It'll be smaller. It'll be weaker. It probably will have formed some sort of superstate or attempted to draw its member states closer together, binding them to additional criminal prosecution, immigration laws, and so forth, which is just going to further alienate them. The thing is, this superstate can't even form without them rounding up and gassing hundreds of thousands of secessionists who will certainly start rioting the moment it happens. So if you want to see a genocide in Europe, all you have to do is try to form an EU superstate, because people that don't support the EU are not going to be very happy about that. And they will start rioting and protesting. Some of these states will end up essentially destabilizing. You're going to need a European military because you're probably going to have to kill these people. You're not going to be able to just hold them back because they'll protest forever. Their economies will go to shit. It's not like they'll have anything else to do. It's not like the EU superstate would have any jobs because of its own failure, its own abysmal, miserable sort of policies can't possibly sustain a decent economy for this eventual superstate they want to form. But we now at least know that the EU will respect the UK's vote. They're not just going to ignore it and say, "Oh, no, you're still in the EU. I don't know what you're talking about. You can't hold this kind of a referendum." They're not actually going to do that. That was actually the hope of a lot of these sort of whining crybabies on the Remain side. Some of them seem to have been somehow tricked into believing they could vote on Twitter or Facebook. And this shows the average intelligence of those that thought, yeah, binding ourselves to an unelected bureaucratic system, a post-national system, oh, that sounds like a good way forward for peace and stability and multiculturalism. No, actually, it's not. It's actually a good way to create a monoculture, because what kind of culture will this EU superstate inevitably form? You see, the member states can't remain, they have to become homogenized. They have to. In order to run such a state, you have to homogenize things. You can't have several dozen different languages spoken, several dozen different types of economies simultaneously functioning without certain groups of people feeling screwed and certain groups of people benefiting from any law that's passed, any regulatory system put into place, any trade deal struck. It is inevitable. Therefore, you have to inject homogeneity into such a system. The way to do that is to pump it full of millions of foreigners, distribute them more or less evenly, and then begin with rounding up and destroying people who are members of political affiliations that happen to disagree with your principles, until everything is one giant, hideous, boring blob that no longer has a culture at all. It's actually a little bit Reich-like when you think about it. Sort of, oh, we're building a new human race. We're building a new European race. We'll just all be Europeans. There'll be no British. There'll be no Germans. There'll be no Poland. There'll be no Greece. Turks, they won't exist. Spanish, what's that? Italy. That's essentially their goal. I think people who support the EU and see it as multicultural and tolerant or inclusive or diverse or some bullshit like that, they don't realize these countries could be all of those things. If the population wants that, these countries will be like that even if they leave the EU. They will continue to be like that. Germany will continue importing hundreds of thousands of migrants. The only difference is the neighboring states, no longer in the EU, won't have to take a share of those migrants or be threatened with fines for not doing so. You will have a patchwork. Some states will not admit immigrants as freely. Some will. Some will have more leftist economics. Some will be more free market. Some of them will be net importers, some net exporters, but they will all be free to determine what's best for them, to negotiate, and to have amicable trade relations with one another. There would still probably be more or less free movement between the European states. I don't think that that's really an issue. It could become one, but it's not really right now. I think people are making a mountain out of a molehill, really, when they think about this as a major issue for why these states should stay in the EU. And the EU's authorities are terrified right now. And as the UK's economy levels out and begins resurging, people will see it's not all doom and gloom if you leave the EU. I expect that the Greeks and the Netherlands and France and these countries, I believe that many of them will hold referenda soon. Now, as to which ones leave, I think that if all of them held referendums, you might see only 2 or 3 leave. And if, 3 or 4 of these states hold referendum, Greece will be one of them. I think the Greeks will be the first to go. I don't think it'll be the Netherlands. I think they'll hold a referendum and it will be defeated. I think France will hold a referendum and it'll be defeated. But the margins will be close enough at that point that they'll inevitably hold more referendums years later. They will then be the next to leave. You could see other states split off as well. Denmark, possibly even Sweden, even though many people don't want to believe it. I think you'll see states at the extreme ends of the political and cultural spectrum leave first. Greece is a far, far left nation currently run by a party which is best described as communist light. France is going further to the right. Denmark is going further to the right. Sweden is under the control of the far left. So these are the sorts of states you would expect to leave first, as opposed to states which are sort of, taking the middle route. And they're not really far left or far right. Their sentiments are more Euro-friendly. I think they'll be the last to leave. I think Italy will be top on the list too, judging from what happened in Rome and Turin with the mayoral elections there. I find it funny because so often Europeans think Americans don't know what's going on in other parts of the world, and yet about half the things I cover are foreign. I find it interesting. I know some Americans aren't well traveled. I happen not to be one of them. I've lived in like 5 different states. I've lived, I live near the Canadian border. I've also lived right on the border with Mexico. We've got a little kitty visitor back there playing with my computer bag. Yeah. Did you vote leave? Cleopatra, did you vote leave? Yeah, I'm sure she did. If she was a British cat, she would have voted leave. That way she no longer faces a catnip tariff. But yes, Europe will respect the UK's vote. That's good news all around. It's good news for everyone. If another referendum was held anyway, do you actually think Remain would win? I think it would further energize the Leave voters and you'd see a larger gap between the two, and Leave would still end up winning. And then you'd see a hell of a lot of protests and riots anyway, because they wouldn't want another referendum. Cameron himself said there would be no second referendum. The result's binding, that's it. That's all. If we leave, we leave. If we stay, we stay. That's fucking it. Even he got tired of it. Now, I'm sure he would love for the UK to go back on this vote and say, oh, no, we're going to stay in the EU. It's just easier. It's too late. It's too late. The volatility is already there. The world markets have already reacted. The EU has already said, fuck this shit. They're tired of dealing with it. The UK's population, though, was the arbiter of it when they said, fuck this shit themselves. We're tired of dealing with the EU. We want to do our own thing. That's about all. Peace out.